Imagine being trapped on a speck of land completely isolated in the Indian Ocean. No trees, no natural shelter, just 200 acres of flat sand sitting barely 7 meters above sea level. This is Tromelin Island, a place where human life is not expected to survive for a few weeks, let alone 15 years. In the summer of 1761, the 7 Years' War was stretching French and British resources to their limits. Amidst this chaos, the captain of the French East India Company ship L'Utile, Jean de Lafargue, saw an opportunity for profit. He docked on the coast of Madagascar and illegally purchased 160 Malagasy slaves, intending to sell them to plantation owners in Mauritius. The captain was in a rush to hide his illicit cargo from colonial governors. He had 2 different maps showing conflicting coordinates for Mauritius. Instead of slowing down to wait for daylight, he chose to sail blindly through the night. The ship veered off course, heading straight toward a tiny landmass then known as the Isle of Sand. The impact was devastating. The ship slammed into the coral reefs surrounding the island. The forward hull tore open, taking 20 French crew members down into the churning water. Meanwhile, the 160 slaves were locked beneath the deck in the cargo hold, trapped as the ocean poured in. The pressure eventually shattered the hold, allowing roughly half of them to escape to the surface. Escaping the sinking ship was only the initial hurdle. The 80-odd slaves who dragged themselves onto the shoreline were now marooned. They had survived the ocean, but they were about to face a far more immediate threat on land: their captors. The 122 surviving French crew members immediately asserted control over the wreckage. They salvaged whatever provisions they could, including the extremely limited supply of drinking water, and kept it exclusively for themselves. Denied a single drop, nearly a third of the surviving slaves died of severe dehydration within the first few days, leaving only around 60 alive. Under the command of First Officer Barthélemy, the survivors began piecing together a new sailing vessel from the shattered remains of L'Utile. Many of the French sailors opted for the lighter task of hunting birds, forcing the Malagasy slaves to do the heavy lifting. Through their grueling physical labor, the new ship, dubbed the Providence, was completed in just 2 months. But the Providence was small. The French crew decided it could only carry their own 122 men. They boarded the vessel, raised the sails, and left the 60 Malagasy slaves standing on the beach. As they departed, the crew left behind a promise to send a rescue ship later. The slaves were now entirely alone. They had been intentionally discarded onto a barren sandbank that lacked the basic components necessary to sustain life. With the French gone, they faced a choice: engineer a way to survive the wasteland or die in the sand. Their immediate biological requirement was fresh water. Before the French left, the combined groups managed to dig a communal well deep into the sand, tapping into a limited underground water table. With the crew gone, the slaves took full control of this single, vital water source to keep themselves hydrated under the punishing sun. Next, they needed fire. Wood is completely absent on the island, making traditional fires impossible. To bypass this, they turned to the local wildlife. They began harvesting and igniting the dense fat of sea turtles, using it as a slow-burning fuel to keep a constant flame alive. With fire secured, they established a reliable food supply. They hunted nesting seabirds and pulled turtles from the marine life around them. Using salvaged iron and quarried coral stone, they constructed a communal oven to cook their catches, ensuring the group received critical calories. Securing water, fire, and a steady supply of essential protein allowed the group to establish a functional, self-sustaining microsociety. Meanwhile, First Officer Barthélemy actually attempted to keep the crew's promise. He pleaded with the colonial governors in Mauritius to dispatch a rescue vessel, but the French bureaucracy flatly refused. Citing a ship shortage during the war with Britain, they deemed a rescue mission for slaves a waste of resources. Back on the island, the survivors were preparing for a much larger threat. The Indian Ocean is notorious for massive cyclones. On a flat sandbank sitting 7 meters above sea level, a direct hit from a cyclone means total exposure to extreme wind and storm surges. To defend against the weather, they became stonemasons. They quarried heavy coral blocks directly from the reef, dragging them inland to construct resilient shelters. By building 1.5-meter thick walls, they created aerodynamic structures capable of withstanding cyclonic winds that would have flattened typical wooden buildings. They also had to protect their own bodies from the relentless sun and wind. As their original garments degraded into rags, they harvested the thick feathers of the local seabirds, carefully weaving them together to manufacture custom, insulating clothing. The French Empire claimed it lacked the resources to rescue them. Yet, cut off from civilization, these slaves used the island's resources, the coral, the birds, the fat, to successfully save themselves. But human engineering can only stall biology for so long. As months bled into years, the reality of their isolation set in. The horizon remained empty. They realized the French promise of rescue was a lie, and no one was coming for them. Desperation drove some to extreme measures. A group of 18 survivors managed to piece together a makeshift raft from the remaining scraps of the wreckage. They pushed out into the open ocean in an attempt to reach Madagascar. They disappeared over the horizon and were never seen again. For those who stayed, the math of their environment took over. Despite their stone houses, feathered clothes, and constant fire, a 200-acre sandbank does not have the carrying capacity to keep 60 people alive indefinitely. Over the ensuing decade, illness and exposure claimed the vast majority of the community. Then, on November 29, 1776, exactly 15 years after the shipwreck, a vessel finally broke through the waves. A new colonial governor had taken power in Mauritius and ordered Captain Jacques-Marie Tromelin to sail La Dauphine specifically to retrieve the survivors. Tromelin's arrival served as final evidence of the survivors' ability to hold the line against a biological clock for over a decade. Out of the original group that watched the French sail away 15 years prior, only 7 women remained alive. With them was an 8-month-old infant boy. They were brought to Mauritius, legally declared free individuals, and the baby was given the name Moses. The scale of their ingenuity is documented history. In 2008, a French archaeological expedition surveyed the island and unearthed the foundations of their settlement. The researchers found the thick coral walls and the communal ovens, physical evidence of their mechanical persistence. The location was officially renamed Tromelin Island in honor of the captain who completed the rescue. Today, it remains under French control, functioning as a remote weather station for visiting scientists. The ruins on that sandbank stand as a monument to human resilience. They prove that even when stripped of civilization, betrayed by humanity, and left to die in a wasteland, the will to survive can outlast the impossible.